Before there were cities, before there were kings, before writing carved memory into clay, there were stories whispered at the edge of the fire, stories about the time before us. In one of the world's great traditions, the Quran says, "And the Djin we created before, from the smokeless flame of fire." In that telling, beings of fire came first, beings of clay humans came after. The angels were told a Kulfa would be placed on earth, a steward, a successor. Whether you hear that as literal history, sacred teaching, or metaphor, the image is powerful. A world passed from older hands to new ones. This is the story of the dawn that followed what happened when humans stepped into that inheritance, and the long night began to lift. Across civilizations, echoes of a pre-human age ripple through myth. The Greeks remembered the Titans before men, the Norse recalled the Jötnar, and a raw world of frost and fire. Mesopotamia told of the Apkallu, the sage beings who taught arts before the flood. Zoroastrian lore wrestled with divers. Hindu cosmology cycles through yugas, where devas and asuras struggle in epochs before our own. The names differ, the pattern recurs. Someone came first, and humans came after. Clay awakens, the first steps toward us. But what does our best evidence say about that after? When do we begin? What did the first humans do when they arrived on history's empty stage? And could those older stories hold distorted memories of creatures not entirely unlike us? If you draw a line from today, back to when recognizably modern humans appear, several landmarks stand out. Fossils from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, redated in 2017 by Jean-Jacques Hublin's team, place early Homo sapiens around 315,000 years ago. In East Africa, the Homo kibish remains were revised to 233,000 years. The Herto skulls in Ethiopia to about 160,000 years. Tim White et al., 2003. Physically, these people are us, but the behavioral spark symbolic art, complex tools, long-distance trade flares gradually. At Blombos Cave on South Africa's south coast, Christopher Henshelwood's excavations uncovered engraved ochre plaques 100,000 years old, shell beads, and a tiny workshop for compound pigments. These aren't just survival tools, they're symbols, recipes, plans, signs of abstract thought. At Pinnacle Point nearby, heat-treating stone to improve flaking appears by 164,000 years, a quiet technological revolution. Along the Mediterranean Levant, shell beads show up at School and Kafze, 120 to 90,000 years, and later at Tafaralt in Morocco, 15,000 years. Wherever the trail runs, we begin to see a mind that thinks in layers. Not only what is this, but what could this become? Then comes movement. Genetic and fossil evidence indicate waves of dispersal out of Africa, beginning perhaps by 70 to 60,000 years ago, fanning along coasts and river valleys into Arabia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and onto Australia by at least 50,000 years ago. Another branch pushes into Eurasia, where modern humans encounter older cousins, Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, and Denisovans farther east. The encounters weren't just hostile or distant, they were intimate. Ancient DNA work pioneered by Svante Pääbo and colleagues shows that most living non-African populations carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal ancestry. Some peoples in Melanesia and parts of East-Southeast Asia carry additional Denisovan ancestry. The first dawn wasn't a clean replacement, it was a braiding. Art follows the people. Hand stencils and animals appear in Sulawesi caves in Indonesia by 40 to 45,000 years. Maxime Aubert et al. Chauvet in France glows by 36,000 years, and later Lascaux dazzles at 17,000. Wherever humans go, they leave more than bones, they leave meaning. And yet, other hominins linger. Neanderthals persist until 40,000 years ago, possibly later in pockets like Gibraltar. On Flores, small-bodied Homo floresiensis survives to 50,000 years. On Luzon in the Philippines, Homo luzonensis appears by 50 to 67,000 years. Were there rare moments when our ancestors saw others in the twilight upright shadows, not quite like them? A scientific maybe, a mythic memory. Many traditions say someone else was here first. The after takes shape, fire, food, and the first temples. If Islam preserves humans as beings of clay and Djin as beings of fire, it's striking that fire sits at the heart of our ascent. Long before Homo sapiens, Homo erectus likely mastered controlled fire more than 400,000 years ago. Some sites suggest even earlier. For sapiens, fire is a tool and a teacher. It softens roots, sterilizes water, expands daylight, hardens spear points, and gathers people. Around flames, ideas leap as quickly as sparks. Language, kinship, memory, these coalesce beside embers. It's not hard to see why myths pair fire with creation. Then comes a second revolution. Architecture of meaning before architecture of cities. On a ridge in southeastern Turkey, the late archaeologist Klaus Schmidt uncovered Göbekli Tepe, a megalithic sanctuary beginning 9,600 BCE, thousands of years before widespread agriculture and pottery in the region. Great T-shaped pillars, some over 10 tons, carved with foxes, birds, snakes, aurochs, and abstract signs arranged in communal circles. There are no houses here at first. There is ritual, as if the first major stone monuments weren't palaces for kings or tombs for princes, but gathering places where scattered bands met, feasted, forged alliances, and told the biggest stories they knew. If there ever was a symbolic after the Djin, you can feel it here, humans, carving an order into the raw world. Not far away in time and space, semi-sedentary Natufian communities in the Levant, 12,500 to 9,500 BCE, begin to tether themselves to place. They harvest wild cereals, keep ancestral burials near their dwellings, and build stone foundations. By Jericho, 8,000 to 7,000 BCE, we find walls and a tower. By Catalhoyuk in central Anatolia, 7,400 to 6,000 BCE, honeycomb towns where houses press wall to wall with paintings of hunter and bull shimmering above hearths. Agriculture unfurls across the Fertile Crescent. Wheat, barley, sheep, goats. Then across the globe, millets and rice in East Asia, teosinte to maize in the Americas, sorghum in Africa. Human time changes, seasons become obligation, fields become memory. As food surplus grows, so do specialization and hierarchy. In southern Mesopotamia, the Ubaid 6,500 to 3,800 BCE gives way to the Uruk period 4,000 to 3,100 BCE, where urban life swells, temples rise, and an invention changes everything: writing. Around 3,200 BCE, impressed signs on wet clay proto-cuneiform track barley rations, labor, land. By the early dynastic period, the Sumerians recite myths like Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta. Later, the Enuma Elish traces cosmic order. The Atrahasis and Gilgamesh grapple with flood and mortality. Astronomy appears in tablets such as Mulapin. On every front, the human after crystallizes into culture large enough to outlive its makers. And yet this flowering costs something. Sedentism brings crowds. Crowding brings disease. Fields invite drought and famine. Walls invite war. The Djin of the wild, whatever you call them, bears, leopards, spirits recede. New powers gather, kings, gods of the city, the ledger and the law. We rearranged the world and the world rearranged us. Meeting the others, science, memory and the shadow of kin. What if stories about beings before us, Djin, titans, sages in code, however faintly, encounters? The archaeological record shows overlaps that make such speculation tempting but not provable. In the Levant, modern humans and Neanderthals overlapped in time and space. In the Altai, Denisovans and modern humans shared landscapes. Interbreeding happened more than once. In caves across Europe, Neanderthals mastered birch pitch glue and fire technology. At Bruniquel Cave in France, 176,000 years, Neanderthals stacked broken stalagmites into rings deep in darkness, a planned symbolic act. They buried their dead in some places. They painted caves still debated at La Pasiega and Maltravieso, with dates placing pigment before modern humans arrived. These are not mindless brutes. They are neighbors with minds of their own. Could a late arriving community in the Zagros or Caucasus have told their children about strange, powerful people with different faces, different voices, living in the high forests or deep caves? Could desert tribes have carried tales of fire dwellers in crags and ruins? It's speculation, but it's notable that medieval Islamic scholars took seriously the idea that beings Djin inhabited the earth before Adam, and even that earlier cycles of life rose and fell. Works by writers like Al-Jahiz, Al-Qazwan, and later commentators explore the unseen as part of a layered cosmos. Whether you read those passages literally or symbolically, they capture a human intuition. we are not the first to walk the night. The genetic record confirms at least this much. We are not alone within ourselves. Many of us carry the shadows of other lineages in our blood. Neanderthal immune variants that modulate skin, hair, or disease response. Denisovan genes linked to Tibetan high-altitude adaptation via EPAS1. Our minds are new. Our bodies are archives. The after holds the before inside it. And as civilization surges, we keep looking backward. Megaliths align to solstices. Old kingdom pyramids glance at the imperishable stars. Vedic hymns track cosmic order across yugas. Abrahamic texts stage drama between seen and unseen worlds. The Djin never quite leave the story. They move into the interstices, ruins, deserts, crossroads, the places where wilderness still breathes. The more we illuminate, the more we sense what the light does not reach, what the after means: stewardship, memory, and the long dawn. So what happened after Djin, after the age of the fire beings in one sacred narrative, after the older hominins in the scientific one? We happened, a clay creature that speaks storms into poetry, that turns shells into counting, that bends fire to smelt ore, that gathers the sky's map into temples of stone. We learned to carry stories through winter. We learned to stitch time. The first dawn was not a moment. It was a millennia-long sunrise. On one side of the ledger stand the dates, names, and sites. Jebel Irhoud, 315,000. Herto, 160,000. Blombos, 100,000. Sulawesi, 45,000. Chauvet, 36,000. Göbekli Tepe, 9,600 BCE, Jericho, 8,000 to 7,000 BCE, Çatalhöyük, 7,400 to 6,000 BCE, Uruk, 4,000 to 3,100 BCE, the first cuneiform, 3,200 BCE. On the other side stand the teachings, humans as Khalifa, answerable for how they hold the earth, beings of fire and beings of clay, sharing a creation larger than either can contain, the warning that knowledge without wisdom breeds ruin, and the promise that stewardship with humility can turn deserts into gardens. Between them runs the bridge we walk, a willingness to let myth carry meaning and science carry method. When a text says, beings of fire came before, the believer hears a sacred order. The scientist hears a metaphor and asks, what came before us in the record? Both can stand at the lip of Bruniquel Cave, stare at Neanderthal rings in the dark, and feel the same shiver. Someone was here before we thought they could be. Both can stand beneath the T-pillars of Göbekli Tepe and ask why the first stones were raised not for kings, but for stories. The dawn that followed Djin is not just the day we began, it's the day we began to remember others who shared the earth, to remember the promises we made to each other around fires, to remember that clay dries and cracks without water, without the living flow that ties family to family, village to village, species to species. The task the Quran names Khalifa and the task archaeology implies custodian are, in the end, the same task spoken in two languages: care. We inherit a world populated, in faith, by seen and unseen beings, in science, by lineages and ecosystems co-evolved through deep time. The dawn is unfinished. It's still bleeding across the horizon as we teach our children the old stories and the new truths. That a hand stencil in Sulawesi is your hand too. That ochre lines in Blombos are your first notebooks. That a Neanderthal's ring of stalagmites in a cave is a cousin's prayer. That a verse about beings of fire recalls the power we hold every time we strike a match. What began after Djin continues now. It continues every time a steward chooses repair over ruin. Every time a story knits past to future. Every time a human being made of clay, warming their palms over borrowed fire, looks up and understands that the long dawn is a gift we must keep lighting.